Good evening, and welcome again to Public Perspective. I'm your host, Kevin McDermott. And for our regular viewers, you know that we like to return to the subject of politics with some regularity on this show because elections are important, especially local elections. People tell me sometimes they only vote for president or governor. Well, the president and governor don't set your property taxes. The people who do are the local officials, and our guest tonight, a candidate for the Cook County Board of Review, Abdelnasser Rashid. May I call you Naz?
Absolutely, not a problem.
Yes. So, Naz, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
So let's talk about what, in fact, is the Board of Review. I just mentioned property taxes. So
Yes.
what is the Board of Review?
So if you are a homeowner or a property owner in Cook County, you get an assessment notice every year from the Cook County Assessor's Office that tells you how much the assessor says that your property is valued. Mm-hmm. And you get to then determine if you think that that's correct or not, if that's fair or not. You can appeal first to the assessor, and the assessor's office will decide on your appeal. And then the next level is the Board of Review. There's another government agency that reviews the assessor's work to make sure that the assessment of your home, of your property, is accurate. And that's what the Board of Reviews is there to do, is to make sure that every appeal could be decided fairly and objectively so that you're not paying anything more than you should in property taxes.
Now, there are 3 members of this board, right? And you are running for one of those seats.
That's correct. So there are 3 Board of Review districts. I'm running for the 1st district, which currently is held by the incumbent Dan Patlak. I'm seeking the Democratic nomination. Of course, hope to win that in just a few weeks, and then hope to go to November and be elected there.
And Patlak is a Republican, right?
He is a Republican.
Right,
I'm running for the Democratic nomination.
Right. So you have some opponents in the primary, but then you'll face Mr. Patlak in the November.
I hope so.
General.
Yes.
Yes. Well, just assume for the purposes of this show that you're going to win, right?
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay. Okay. And we'll see. We'll check in later to see if that
Sounds
really
good.
comes out to be true. So there's been a lot of stories in the news about property assessment. I know you've actually spent some time working in the assessor's office under the new assessor, Fritz Kagi. Mm-hmm. So in a nutshell, what's been wrong with the property tax system in Cook County? It seems like everyone complains about taxes no matter what, but it does seem like with the newspaper articles about assessment and about property valuation, what's going on here?
Sure. So you're absolutely right that people have been fed up with high property taxes in Cook County for a long time. But what really has emerged in the last few years because of investigative journalism by the Chicago Tribune and ProPublica, they released this series in 2017 called The Tax Divide, which really shed light on just how broken and corrupted our property tax system is. In fact, this series was a finalist for a Pulitzer Prize. That's how groundbreaking it was. And in essence, if you are a homeowner in Cook County, if you are not as well connected and unable to hire the most expensive property tax lawyers, you don't necessarily get a fair shake in the property tax system. The previous assessor, Joe Barrios, systematically underassessed middle-class homes and homes in the suburbs and in communities of color, and underassessed downtown commercial properties. And what that really means is...
So the people who were least able to afford to pay property taxes were getting hit with the highest bills.
Homeowners were, exactly, so homeowners were picking up a greater share of the burden than downtown commercial properties and some of the wealthiest corporations in Illinois and in Cook County.
Now, but the Board of Review doesn't set those. That's the assessor's office is determining those valuations, right?
That's correct. The Board of Review then reviews those appeals. And what was shown is that the people who appeal are generally the ones who can hire attorneys and people who are going to look at an assessment notice and know that they can appeal and should appeal. If you're working 2 jobs and you come home and you see you might put the assessment notice on the side, you might put any other information you have on the side and forget that you know this is something that you should do. And what we've seen is generally folks in wealthier areas, people with access to attorneys, are the ones who are appealing, which then exacerbates the divide and exacerbates the inequity that's in the system.
And I think it's important to note here that this is kind of a zero-sum game, right? Because there's a certain amount of taxes that has to be raised, right? And I know getting too deep into baseball here, but municipalities who need money issue a levy. Right? That means they're asking for a certain amount of money, and they send that to the county clerk's office, and then that amount of money has to be raised, or something close to it, has to be raised in order to meet the needs of that municipality or school board or library board or whatever it is, right? So that levy system starts out, and all that money has to be raised. Well, then let's say, if you and I were in this one district where we were the only two taxpayers, and $100,000 had to be raised in taxes, and you got your assessment lowered, then that necessarily means mine has to go up because we have to meet this levy amount, correct?
Exactly. So no, you hit the nail on the head. It's important to know that the assessor and the Board of Review don't actually set your taxes. The taxes are levied by the local bodies, by your school board, your municipality, the park district, the MWRD, and many other local taxing bodies.
The Metropolitan Water
Yes,
Reclamation District.
exactly.
Yes.
So all of these local bodies that are providing services are saying, here's how much we need in property tax money to provide these services. The way the assessments come in is they determine what share you pay. And so if we are, let's say we are the only two property owners in a particular district, and both our homes are identical, let's say they're each worth $100,000. If the assessor or the Board of Review decide that actually your home's worth $150,000, suddenly you've picked up a much larger part of the tax bill than mine. Then even if mine isn't even lowered, I could still be at 100, but now you're picking up a greater share because the pot is the same.
Yes, and that is, I think, the fundamental issue that the story on the tax divide was trying to get to. That, you know, your loss is my gain.
Absolutely.
And vice versa.
Yeah, we're all interconnected. When it comes to our property tax system, if Trump Tower gets a $14 million refund, as they did, you and I are paying for it, and every homeowner in Cook County is paying for it.
I think that's really important for people to understand, that these aren't just amorphous tax breaks that, oh, geez, some corporation gets to send more dividends to their shareholders. Well, that may be true as well. But really, that tax pool of tax money has to be made up somehow. And it's us, the regular taxpayers, who end up paying more because these big operations are paying less than they should.
That's absolutely right. And property taxes are different than other types of taxes. So if you know, there's an economic downturn and people buy less things, then government may get less money in sales tax revenue. If people drive less, then the government may get less money in gasoline tax revenue. But with property taxes, that's not how it works. Your school board, your municipality is going to get the money that it's asking for in property taxes. And so when someone goes down, when someone gets a refund unfairly, then the rest of us are paying for it.
So let's talk a little bit about the process and how the current broken process. And I think this is also something that most people don't realize, that there's kind of a feedback loop, a negative feedback loop, if you will, with a certain group of property tax attorneys who are politically connected. The people who are the big property owners are seeking relief. They go to this select group of people who are politically connected, who make campaign contributions, or maybe not, but they're connected in some other way. And they go to the current Board of Review, and they make their case, or they go to the assessor. And I know this used to happen more with the previous assessor Barrios. But they go because they know the strings to pull. They know how the system works, right? And so they know the people that they're working with. And so all this kind of interconnection allows these attorneys who work in this to be successful and get these big production reductions for their clients. Then they, of course, make, especially with the big commercial guys, the lawyers make fees, and everybody goes home happy except the poor individual homeowner.
Except the rest of us, exactly.
Right.
So yes, what you described is essentially how the system has worked. You have appeals being decided. First, let me take a step back. You have people appealing first at the assessor's office, then they're going to the Board of Review, and then they're going to another body called the Property Tax Appeals Board at the state level. And then after that, some of them even go to court, some of these corporations. And so you have 3 levels of appeal plus the court system where we've essentially created a culture of appealing. People who shouldn't be, now don't get me wrong, if you are overassessed, if your home is overassessed, if your business is overassessed, you should appeal to make sure that you're only paying what you should be paying. But for the folks who are assessed, close to what the market value is, we've created a habit of appealing because people are trying to, essentially some of these downtown corporations want to get the lowest property tax bill that they can. They can hire clouded attorneys, they can hire, and they can pay thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars to get reductions in their assessments. And that creates, unfortunately, a system where your homeowner who is, working to try to put food on the table, who's trying to just, provide for their family, ends up paying more than they should.
So let's go through the process a little bit. So let's say I'm even a wealthy homeowner. I'm not, but suppose I own $1 million home in Oak Brook, Lake Forest.
Sure.
Which I guess would be a starter home in some of those areas. And I want to go, I don't like my assessment. So I start out at the assessor's office. What do I do and how do I do that?
Sure. So you would essentially file, there is a deadline. You'll get your assessment notice from the assessor. They'll say within a certain period you can appeal your taxes there, appeal your assessment
And
there.
this is before I get my tax bill. By that time it's too late. Right?
Exactly. All of the tax bills that we're paying are for the previous year's assessment. So all of the bills that are due in March of 2020 are paying your 2019 taxes. So if you're the owner of this home and you get this assessment and you say, well, this is not what my home is worth. I know that it's worth less than what the assessor thinks it's worth. You should then appeal to the assessor and demonstrate that other homes nearby, similar size, that have sold recently, have actually sold for a smaller amount than what the assessor believes. And that's your first opportunity at fixing the problem.
So it's similar to an appraisal. I mean, I as a homeowner
Absolutely.
go out and essentially get what they call comparables from houses in the neighborhood or similar houses in similar neighborhoods.
Absolutely.
To say this is what they're evaluated at and mine is valued, whatever it is, 25% higher. And so I think you should reduce my valuation by 25% to match these other comparables.
That's exactly right. And the assessor's office is your first opportunity to try to fix it. If you don't like what you see there, then you go to the Board of Review. So then the Board of Review gives you the opportunity to present your evidence and fix the assessment if it's mistaken.
So, I mean, I kind of understand the idea of various levels of appeal. I mean, the court system is the same way with appeals courts. But why would if the tax assessment process is fundamentally or if it's fundamentally fair, let's say, which we don't think it is, but you're trying to get it there. What would succeed at the Board of Review level that did not succeed at the assessor level?
Sure. So the assessor is responsible for assessing 1.8 million properties throughout Cook County. They do this over a period of 3 years. In essence, this is mass valuation. They're not looking. It's not possible to look at every home and every commercial property and give it its assigned value. And so they're using computer models. They're using data. They're doing this with limited resources. And so things are bound to be wrong sometimes. Okay. Some of the values are going to be incorrect, and even when you appeal, some of the appeals will be decided based on the information that the assessor has that may or may not be correct. Okay. So the Board of Reviews is the opportunity to really go and get some attention to your specific case to make sure that you're given a fair shake to fix the assessment.
So it's an analogy to the court system. It would be like I go to court, there's a decision, I don't really like it, so I go to the appeals court.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
And state my case again. And so
Absolutely.
You essentially, the Board of Review is the appeals court in the appeals process.
That's right. That's right. And one of the reasons that it exists is to prevent the court system from getting flooded with court cases saying my assessment's too high. So the Board of Review is supposed to step in and make sure that we're correcting the assessor's work when it goes wrong, so that you don't have the courts flooded with lawsuits.
So I mean, what kind of caseload does the Board of Review get? How many cases do you see in the course of a year?
Close to 250,000 appeals, I believe in 2018 is what we saw. So it's hundreds of thousands. Large number of them are are residential, but there are also tens of thousands of commercial appeals as well. One thing to note is I believe in Cook County, more than 50% of commercial properties have appealed their taxes. whereas in other parts of the country, it's a much smaller number. There isn't a culture and a practice of appealing.
Or an expectation.
Or an exactly, that I need to appeal,
Right.
exactly. And so that's one of the things that we're struggling with in Cook County is we need to make sure that we're bringing down the volume of appeals so that you only appeal if you need to, and get not incentivize folks who can hire a clouded attorney or who just want to reduce the bill because they think they can. If you're some downtown skyscraper, no, don't do that. If your assessment's close to accurate, then that's how it should be, and you shouldn't be trying to transfer your burden of the property taxes onto homeowners.
So you mentioned 250,000 appeals that would come to the Board of Review.
That's correct, yeah.
But there are only 3 commissioners. How on earth can
Yeah.
you handle that level of
Right.
volume?
Yeah, so it is 3 commissioners, but it is a government agency with over 100 employees.
But it must be computer models.
There's a lot of data involved, and a lot of data crunching and computers, of course, involved in the process. It's not not every single value is determined one by one.
So explain then the role of the commissioner. I mean, given that there's 100 staff members, a lot of computer models crunching numbers, where do the 3 board members actually come in? What would they do in this process, hypothetical process of me appealing my taxes?
Well, the buck stops with the commissioner, and they essentially provide the guidance and the framework for the staff to do the work. So
it's a policy-setting board, essentially. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
it is a policy-setting board, and it makes sure you have to hire the right staff. You have to make sure that that the agency is doing the job that it's supposed to be doing, and at the end of the day, you're going to be held accountable to the voters of Cook County for the work of the agency.
But you don't, as a commissioner, you wouldn't step in and make an individual decision on a piece of property, or might you?
Generally, you don't get into the weeds of a specific property. You will be involved, of course, in making sure that all of the data that's being gathered, that the assumptions that we're using are accurate. You wouldn't want to intervene for any purpose other than to make sure that every decision is being made accurately and fairly. So the staff will do the bulk of the work. The commissioner makes sure that the agency is deciding on appeals fairly and objectively and is using the right data.
So as a commissioner then, assuming if you were elected then to serve, describe your typical day. I mean, what would you be looking at, and how would you try to sway the process, or how would you evaluate the process to see if it's fair, and if not, how would you try to move it into a fairer mechanism?
I'm really glad you asked. So one of the first things that we have to do is make sure that we're getting access to the best market data that's available. There are a lot of databases out there. There's information that we need to bring into the assessment process and to the Board of Review to make sure that the assumptions that we're making and the information that we're using to determine appeals is the best information that's out there. So get that data, have the professionals. So I'd hire people who are trained and equipped to be able to crunch that data and to make the best decision for homeowners. The other thing that we need to do is make sure that we're going directly to homeowners, going to your township to do workshops to help you appeal if you need help, and to make sure that you're getting all the exemptions that you're entitled to. One of the things that I'm most proud of in my work at the assessor's office was having championed a bill in Springfield that automatically renews the senior citizen exemption on your home. So the way the system used to work was if you're 65 or older, you had to prove every year that you're still
65?
You
haven't gotten younger?
Exactly. Yeah. So you had to reapply for your senior citizen exemption every year. And what we did is we said, that doesn't make any sense. Government knows when people sell their homes, and government knows when people pass away. And so we should be able to get that data and keep and automatically renew your senior citizen exemption without you having to fill out a paper every year. Because people also forget to do it. You have thousands of seniors who forget to apply. That ends up causing their tax bill to spike, and then they have to go and correct that. And so that type of modernization, that kind of common sense reform, is what we need to be doing in the Board of Review as well. And those are the types of things that I'd be doing day to day.
It seems to me, I'm just speculating here, but it seems to me that it could be automated even further, that the state certainly knows how old I am because they have my driver's license.
That's
that
right.
has my birthday on it, right? So if I'm a property owner, they know how old I am, and I shouldn't have to apply for a senior citizen exemption anyway, because the state knows how old I am.
That is true. There are some nuances. You might own 2 homes, but so you can only qualify for the senior exemption on your principal property, and there might be other quirks that might, where it might be a good idea to apply the first time, but to continue every year, to have to renew, that just doesn't make any sense.
I say, none of us gets any younger. Once we
That's right.
achieve senior status, we're there. So talk a little bit about the campaign. I mean, I'm primarily interested in what the office does and what you do, but why are you running, and what are the planks tell me, give me your campaign pitch. Sure. What is it you hope to do if you are elected?
Kevin, when my parents came to this country in 1966 and moved to Chicago in 1970, 50 years ago, they didn't have anything with them. My dad worked minimum wage jobs. My mom operated a booth at the local flea market. I remember as a young kid going with her to the flea market on the weekends, helping my dad with his store, and they worked diligently over years and decades to save up a little bit of money. My dad pooled it with his brother, opened a small business, and he was able to have our family enter the middle class, to send my siblings and me to college, and to buy their own home. Today, that path is so much harder for working families and for middle class families throughout Cook County, in part because our property tax system is punishing homeowners. So for me, that's why I'm running. I see the system, I've seen it from the inside, and I need to make sure that I'm doing everything I can to help fix the problems.
And this punishment that you refer to, it goes back to what we were saying earlier, that if you get your taxes cut, my taxes go up.
Absolutely.
Because the pool has to be whatever it is.
You've got some of the wealthiest corporations in Cook County that are abusing the assessment process to get huge reductions and forcing homeowners to pick up the share.
Well, so given that you're looking to reform, let's go back to what we were talking about earlier, the cadre of connected lawyers, clouded lawyers. And that's a deeply entrenched system. And there's, as you know, in any political scheme,
absolutely, yeah,
power doesn't give itself up easily, particularly in Chicago, where this has been an entrenched tradition for many, many years.
Right.
So whatever reforms you would like to introduce would be fiercely opposed, I would think, by those who have a vested interest in the current system. So how would you approach that opposition?
Well, I can tell you that there's going to be an effort to stop me from getting elected because of the reforms that we propose, and many of those who've been benefiting from the broken and corrupted system are going to be supporting my opponent, Dan Patlack, in the general election. But we're going to take our message directly to homeowners, because homeowners know, they'll be able to look at what we're proposing and who we're supported by to decide who's really best, who's looking out for their interests. And I'm so proud of the coalition that we've built. I've been endorsed by, just in the past week, by the Chicago Tribune and the Daily Herald, and a couple of weeks ago we got the Chicago Sun-Times endorsement. So all three major papers in Chicago have endorsed our campaign because they know that we're fighting for homeowners and fighting to do what's right. We've also built a coalition of support from elected officials, from Senator Durbin to Mayor Lightfoot to legislators throughout the county. And that's because people are tired of the system and the corruption. And homeowners understand, and they feel in their property tax bills every year, especially when the bills are due, just how broken the system is. So this coalition has been, I've been so honored to have the support of all these folks, and we're going to deliver for people in November.
Now, even assuming you're elected in November, which we'll make that assumption from them, you would be one of three on the board. And do you think that you would have the allies on the board in order to fight back against this back-scratching, clouded club?
No, certainly. I would work collaboratively with my fellow commissioners to make sure that we're moving the system in the right direction. I believe we've already started the process by electing a new assessor and kicking Joe Barrios out of office. That got the process rolling to begin some of the reforms that are needed. But this system is deeply broken, and it's going to need a lot more work.
What I fear is that the existing legal, I shouldn't say legal structure, but the cadre of clouded lawyers, right? The corporations are still going to hire those same law firms. They're still going to come in with their same arguments, and they're going to face the same 100 people that are on the staff. How will the decision-making change? Why won't they get the same result that they got all along?
Well, one of the things I believe the Board of Review should be doing is talking about and being transparent about the assumptions that it uses in determining a property's value, because this is not rocket science. You know, appraisal is a profession. There's an International Association of Assessment Officers, and there are tests and measures of whether an assessment is accurate or not. They're called sales ratio studies. So, you know, it's a standard practice across the country for sales ratio studies to be done to measure the accuracy of assessments, and I believe they should be done both for the assessor and for the Board of Review. And that's one of the things that I'd bring to the board. I'd make sure that we are being very clear and transparent about exactly how we're arriving at our valuation. So if there's something happening that shouldn't be happening, the world can know about it.
And does an individual commissioner have the ability to override, or is that, I guess it'd be veto power? Let's say a clouded corporation comes in and your two other commissioners say, oh, well, yeah, we're giving these guys a break. We always gave them. Do you as an individual commissioner have the ability to say, I don't think that should stand?
So it's a collaborative process, and it's a democratic process within the Board of Review. So no one commissioner can override, can veto the others. But I do think that, you know, the agency works as one. I will be one commissioner, but we'll be working collaboratively with the staff and with my fellow commissioners to really move the system in the right direction.
And from what I understand, it seems like it's really it's the models that are being used and the data that you're selecting, and that seems to be the core of where you need to make these changes. Make sure the models are accurate, make sure the data is trustworthy.
That's great. That's exactly right. And let me give you one important example of that. A downtown property can come and say, you know, we haven't been able to rent out this space, and so you should give us a significant vacancy reduction so that we can get our bill reduced. Well, if other landlords in the area, similar buildings, have been able to rent out their space, but you in particular have been asking for an exorbitant rent, then you don't deserve that vacancy reduction. And so we should be looking at what is the market vacancy in an area, for example, so that you're treated like everyone else, and every other property owner knows that they're being treated with the same data and the same information and the same assumptions as other properties are.
And this is something that may not have happened in the past, this kind of scenario you just painted.
It's hard to know, and so one of the things I'm gonna make sure we do is to be very clear about how we're arriving at our decisions.
And that may involve changing how you make the decision.
That's
as
correct.
well, right?
That's correct.
So the first step is to examine how are we doing this today.
Absolutely,
right?
absolutely.
And then how should we be doing it, and then just make it really, really clear to everyone. This is how that decision was arrived at.
That's
right.
exactly right.
Right. So how have you been? Well, actually, what's your message to the voters? People think that the machine is what it is, and you can't fight. My dad always used to say, you can't fight City Hall. But your message seems to be something different from that, right?
Well, I think people have, you know, really come together. And well, first I want to, you know, just acknowledge that the public spotlight has been on the property tax system for the last few years, and that's really helped change the conversation because of the work that the Trib and ProPublica have done, and you know, other journalists have taken interest in it as well. You know, we can't hide from the problems in the property tax system, and it can't operate in the obscurity that it operated in the past. So we're in a different environment than we used to be in. So, and you know, folks came together and elected a new assessor, Joe Barrios. He wasn't someone people thought you can take on as the chairman of the Cook County Democratic Party, but he lost his election.
On that note, believe it or not, we're already out of time.
Okay.
So Naz, I wish you the best of luck in your election.
Thank you.
And after you're commissioner, we'll have you back on the show.
Thanks so much. I'd love to be back.
All right.
Yeah.
And thank you for joining us once again on Public Perspective. I'm your host, Kevin McDermott. You can find us every Saturday night at 8 on Comcast Channel 19, or see us on the web at publicperspective.tv. So until next time, thank you and good night.